Funny thing about being broken. People only notice when you're smiling again. When you were crawling through the dark, begging for a way out, no one clapped. No one saw the nights you held yourself together with nothing but willpower and silence. They saw the damage, not the discipline. They saw the fall, not the fight. But someone else was watching, quietly, closely, not judging your pain, but measuring your endurance. Because pain doesn't impress heaven. Persistence does. And you didn't quit when you had every reason to. You ever notice how the world only claps when it understands your story? When you fit into their neat little boxes of success, when your victories look shiny and public. But when you're struggling, when you're fighting demons no one can see, when you're breaking quietly, no one's around, no applause, no recognition, no warmth, just silence. Because the world only celebrates what it can measure. But heaven doesn't work like that. Heaven celebrates what the world overlooks. The quiet victories, the unseen battles, the days you didn't quit when no one was watching. The world might not notice the night you cried yourself to sleep and still woke up to try again. But heaven saw it all, and it smiled. You've been conditioned to believe that recognition defines value. That if no one sees it, it doesn't count. That if they don't clap, it must not be worth much. But that's a lie the world sold you to keep you chasing validation. Heaven never needed a stage to call you worthy. It saw your effort in the dark and called it devotion. It saw your sacrifice when you had nothing left and called it faith. You think you've been overlooked, but in reality, you've been protected. Hidden until the right time, refined in silence while the world looked away. Because not every flower blooms in sunlight, some were made for the storm. The funny part, the people who doubted you will never understand how you survived. They saw the surface, not the struggle. They thought your silence meant defeat, when it was really discipline. They mistook your stillness for weakness, not knowing you were rebuilding quietly. Heaven watched you hold your tongue when you could have fought back. It saw the way you forgave when revenge would have been easier. It noticed the times you gave without expecting anything in return. The world calls that foolish. Heaven calls it strength. You think heaven didn't see you when you were tired, when you prayed not for success, but just for strength to get through one more day. When you kept smiling even though the weight of your own thoughts was crushing you. Every sigh, every tear, every breath that carried pain but refused to quit, it all counted. The world measures progress by applause, but heaven measures it by endurance. That's why you're still standing. Because heaven doesn't need you to be perfect. It just needs you to keep moving. You've been underestimated because your growth wasn't loud. People like noise. They equate volume with value. But you grew in silence. You evolved in private. You became strong in the kind of loneliness that most people run from. Heaven saw that. It was never about impressing the world. It was about surviving long enough to outlast it. Because heaven doesn't crown the loudest. It crowns the last one still standing when the noise fades. And that's you. They won't understand why things start turning in your favor now. They'll think it came out of nowhere, like you just got lucky. But heaven doesn't operate on luck. It operates on justice. You paid your dues in heartbreak, in discipline, in sleepless nights. You built character when no one was clapping. You learned humility when it would have been easier to quit. You didn't take shortcuts. You didn't sell out. You stayed true when everything tried to bend you. That's why heaven's proud. Not because you're perfect, but because you didn't break your integrity just to be accepted. See, the world loves results, but heaven loves reasons. It doesn't just see what you did. It knows why you did it. It knows when your heart was pure but misunderstood, when your intentions were right but mocked. It saw when you gave your all and still got blamed. And instead of punishing you, it took note. Heaven keeps receipts even when the world forgets. And when the time is right, it pays back with interest. That's what's coming, not payback, but payoff. The kind that makes silence worth it. You might think no one sees your effort, but heaven's been documenting every quiet act of faith. Every moment you said, "I'll try again," when you didn't even have the energy to move. Every time you lifted someone else while you were drowning yourself. Every time you showed up when quitting would have been justified. You thought those moments disappeared, but they didn't. They became evidence, proof that even without an audience, you stayed faithful, and heaven rewards that kind of faith differently. Not with noise, not with flashes, but with peace power, and doors that no man can close. You see, heaven's applause doesn't sound like clapping. It sounds like alignment. When things start working in your favor, without explanation. When people who once ignored you start needing your advice. When opportunities find you, instead of you chasing them. That's heaven saying, "I saw it all." Every hidden tear, every silent prayer, every time you broke and still believed. Heaven doesn't forget. It watches quietly while the world judges loudly. And then, when the time is right, it lifts you, not to prove the world wrong, but to prove you were right to keep going. You didn't realize that every breath you took when you wanted to give up was proof that you were worth something. You kept going when nothing made sense, when everything in you screamed to stop. And that's exactly what survival looks like. Not pretty, not clean, not glamorous. Just raw, quiet defiance against everything that tried to destroy you. People see strength as loud, muscles money, confidence. But real strength is surviving when you've got nothing left but a heartbeat and a whisper saying, "Keep going." That's what makes heaven proud. You didn't need applause. You didn't need witnesses. You didn't even need certainty. You just kept walking through the fire, even when it felt like it was never going to end. That's survival, and that's the proof that you were built for something bigger. You thought surviving was small, didn't you? That it wasn't enough, because the world doesn't celebrate survival, it celebrates winning. It claps for the comeback, not the crawl. But heaven doesn't measure success the way people do. Heaven looks at the one who crawled through hell and says, That one's mine. Because surviving when you shouldn't have is proof of purpose. Proof that you were made for more than the pain that tried to define you. People who haven't been through real storms will never understand what it means just to breathe through the night. They'll never understand the strength it takes to wake up when everything in you wants to stay buried. But heaven does. Heaven saw every second you chose life when death, in your mind, your heart, your spirit, was easier. You thought survival was weakness because you didn't see results. Because you weren't shining yet. Because you weren't winning yet. Because your prayers weren't answered the way you wanted. But survival was the test. You were being refined in silence, stripped of everything that didn't belong in your next chapter. Heaven was watching, not to see if you'd win, but to see if you'd endure, to see if you'd trust even when you didn't understand. And you did. That's what made you worthy of what's coming. The blessing doesn't go to the one who had it easy. It goes to the one who stayed when it hurt the most. People like to talk about faith like it's something beautiful, something peaceful. But you know better. You've lived the kind of faith that bleeds. The kind that breaks you open, leaves you trembling, questioning everything, but still holding on. The kind of faith that's ugly, desperate, unfiltered. That's the kind heaven honors. Not the polished kind that looks good in words, but the messy kind that survives in silence. Because faith isn't about never doubting. It's about never quitting, even when the doubt gets louder than the hope. You didn't quit. That's why you're still standing. You thought the darkness was punishment, but it was protection. If you had risen too soon, they would have destroyed you. If you had been lifted when you were still bleeding, you would have broken again. So heaven hid you, kept you covered, made you invisible while you healed. You thought you were forgotten, but you were being prepared. The things that tried to crush you only proved you couldn't be crushed. The same storms that should have drowned, you built the lungs you're breathing with now. That's the secret no one tells you. Survival builds strength that comfort never could. You didn't survive because you were the strongest. You survived because you refused to let go. Because even in the silence, even in the pain, you still whispered to yourself, maybe tomorrow will be different. That tiny hope was enough. You didn't need a miracle. You became one. Every time you got back up, you rewrote your story. Every time you chose to keep walking, you told heaven you were still in the fight. And heaven took note. You might not see the reward yet, but it's coming. Because nothing survived in vain. Nothing endured goes unnoticed. They thought you were weak because you didn't fight back. Because you stayed quiet. Because you kept showing up. But the strongest ones aren't always the loudest. They're the ones who kept loving when they had every reason to hate. The ones who kept believing when every door shut in their face. The ones who smiled when life kept trying to break them. That kind of strength doesn't come from willpower. It comes from something divine. Something inside you that refused to die, even when everything else did. That's why you're still here. And now that you've survived, they won't understand how. They'll try to explain it with luck, with timing, with coincidence. But heaven knows better. It wasn't luck. It was resilience. It wasn't coincidence. It was grace. Every sleepless night, every tear, every moment of silence added up to this. You're not just someone who made it. You're proof that survival itself is sacred. Proof that sometimes the greatest miracle isn't getting everything you prayed for, but staying alive long enough to see why it all had to happen the way it did. You know what's funny? People pray for blessings, but when they come wrapped in struggle, they call it a curse. Everyone wants to be lifted up, but no one wants to feel the weight that builds the strength to rise. They want light without ever knowing what it's like to crawl through darkness. But here's the thing. Heaven doesn't lift you up until it knows you can handle the height. Because if you rise too early, the fall will destroy you. That's why it takes so long. That's why it hurts so much. Because what's being built inside you is bigger than what's around you. You weren't being ignored. You were being strengthened in secret. You wanted the reward, but not the refining. You asked for power, but not the process. And heaven said, wait. That word burned you, didn't it? Waiting. The silence that feels like rejection. But the truth is, waiting is the proof that something's being prepared for you. Heaven doesn't say, no. It says, not yet. Because there's timing in everything, and yours had to be perfect. You thought the delay was punishment, but it was mercy. You weren't being punished. You were being protected. You were being built into someone who could carry what's coming without breaking under it. You see, people think being lifted means standing above others. No, it means standing above who you used to be. It means conquering the version of yourself that doubted, that feared, that broke. Being lifted isn't about status. It's about strength. It's about reaching a point where nothing outside of you can shake what's inside of you. Heaven lifts you not so you can shine, but so you can see. See how far you've come, how much you've grown, how much darkness you've walked through without losing your soul. That's the kind of elevation that can't be seen from the outside. It's an awakening that happens quietly, almost painfully, but when it's done, you'll never go back to the person who begged for the light. You spent nights crying for help, thinking no one heard you. But every tear was a message written in silence. Heaven doesn't always respond with words. Sometimes it answers with endurance. You didn't get what you wanted, but you got what you needed: strength. You learned how to survive without applause, how to move without validation, how to rise without a hand to pull you up. That's how heaven teaches. It doesn't pamper you, it polishes you. It doesn't comfort your weakness. It exposes it, burns it away, until what's left is unshakable. That's why you were broken. Not to destroy you, but to rebuild you into something eternal. You started to notice the shift, didn't you? The same things that used to break you no longer do. The same people who used to control you can't anymore. The same fears that used to chase you now feel small. That's not arrogance. That's growth. That's what happens when heaven starts lifting you. It's not a spotlight moment. It's not loud. It's quiet, almost invisible. But you feel it. That strange peace that makes no sense in chaos. That stillness when everything around you is falling apart. That's not you going numb. That's heaven reminding you that you're finally above what used to drown you. People will start to notice something different. They'll ask what changed. They'll think it's something you did. A new mindset, a new plan, a new opportunity. But it wasn't you. It was grace. Something divine decided you'd had enough of the valley. That it was time to lift you up, not because you were perfect, but because you were faithful in the pain. That's the secret. Faithfulness in the dark always leads to favor in the light. You didn't need to prove your worth. You just had to endure long enough for heaven to reveal it. And when you rise, it won't look like you expected. You'll lose things, people. Comforts, old versions of yourself, because elevation always requires separation. The higher you go, the thinner the air gets, the quieter it becomes. Not everyone can breathe where you're going. Not everyone's meant to understand your next chapter. That's how you'll know heaven's hand is in it. When peace starts to replace people. When solitude starts to feel sacred. When you no longer chase what doesn't belong to you. That's not loneliness. That's preparation for visibility. You'll look back and realize the very moments that felt like endings were actually beginnings. The betrayals that broke you were just divine redirections. The pain that silenced you was just heaven adjusting your volume, so when you speak again, the world will listen. Because when heaven lifts you, it's not a soft rise. It's a resurrection. And resurrections only happen after something dies. Your old self, your old fears, your old doubts, they had to go. The version of you that's being lifted is different, stronger, sharper, calmer, dangerous in peace. And that's when you'll understand. It was never about getting what you wanted. It was about becoming who you were meant to be. Heaven isn't impressed by titles or success. It's moved by endurance, by heart, by truth. And when it sees someone who refuses to break, who keeps believing through the fire, it says no. And when that no comes nothing, no man, no force, no failure can stop the rise. Because heaven's hand doesn't just lift you, it crowns you with purpose, and no one can take that away. Funny thing about being lifted up, people think it's all glory, lights, and applause. They don't talk about the part where everything you love gets tested. The part where your peace becomes a battlefield, and your patience becomes a weapon. See, when heaven decides to lift you, it doesn't just hand you the blessing. It measures your heart to see if you can handle it. Because the truth is, most people don't lose what they want. They lose what they weren't ready to carry. Everyone prays for the mountain, but no one realizes how lonely the climb is. When heaven starts moving you upward, it strips you of weight. And sometimes that weight has a name, a face, a memory. You think you're losing something, but you're actually gaining freedom. The process is quiet but brutal. You'll start feeling uncomfortable in places that once felt safe. The conversations that used to excite you will now drain you. The people you used to call family will start to feel like strangers. It's not betrayal, it's transition. Heaven doesn't let you stay small when it's time to grow. It starts closing doors, taking away distractions, exposing illusions you once called truth. You'll fight it at first, thinking you're under attack. But really, it's protection in disguise. Because before you rise, you have to be purified. You have to let go of anything that can't breathe at higher altitudes. You'll notice how certain things that once mattered don't anymore. The arguments, the validation, the approval, they all lose their flavor. That's not apathy, that's alignment. You're no longer chasing what was meant to distract you. You're starting to see that peace is more valuable than attention. Heaven doesn't lift noisy hearts. It lifts the ones that learn to find silence in chaos. It lifts the ones who stopped begging for people to see them and started focusing on being seen by purpose itself. The funny thing is, when you stop trying to be noticed, that's when you finally are. Because authenticity shines brighter than performance ever could. The people around you might not understand what's happening. They'll think you've changed. And they're right. You have. You've outgrown the noise. You've stopped responding to things beneath your calling. You no longer defend your name because truth doesn't need a lawyer. You no longer chase validation because peace doesn't need an audience. That's when heaven smiles, when you stop explaining your growth to those committed to misunderstanding it. Because the more you explain, the more they twist. And the more they twist, the more you lose yourself. Silence becomes your strength. Detachment becomes your armor. And that's exactly how heaven prepares you for the next level. By making you immune to the opinions that once controlled you, you'll start to see tests disguised as opportunities. People will return pretending they've changed. Doors will open that look good but lead backward. That's how elevation works. Before every rise, there's temptation. Not the kind that looks evil, but the kind that looks familiar. You'll be tempted to go back to comfort, to settle where you were once accepted. But that's the trap. Heaven doesn't lift you just to see you crawl back into cages that once felt like home. It's testing if you've learned that your peace is more important than your popularity. If you've learned that your destiny is worth walking alone for a while. Because if you can't walk alone, you're not ready to be seen by the world. Then comes the silence. The long, eerie stillness where nothing seems to move. You'll wonder if heaven forgot you. You'll question everything. Your path, your worth, your strength. But that silence is not absence. It's strategy. It's the space where your spirit catches up to your destiny. Where your roots deepen before your branches rise. You're not being ignored. You're being incubated. And when it's time, you'll see why it had to take this long. Because some lifts happen fast, but they don't last. Heaven doesn't rush. It refines. It waits until your patience becomes discipline, your pain becomes purpose, and your heart becomes unshakable. The people who once looked down on you will start to see something they can't explain. You won't have to announce your rise. Your peace will do it for you. You won't have to prove your worth. Your results will whisper it louder than your words ever could. The same mouths that doubted you will now speak your name with curiosity. The same eyes that rolled at you will now follow you in silence. And that's not revenge. That's revelation. That's heaven showing them what happens when it decides to lift someone who refused to quit. But here's the secret most people don't see. When heaven lifts you, it doesn't make you higher than others. It just makes you clearer to yourself. It makes you aware of how small the noise really was, how meaningless the drama really felt, how empty the validation really sounded. You start to see life differently, not through pride, but through peace. You stop rushing. You stop competing. You stop begging for doors to open because you finally realize you are the door. And when you walk with that kind of awareness, the world stops being something you chase. It becomes something that adjusts to you. That's the beauty and the madness of it all. The higher you go, the fewer people there are, but the more of yourself you meet. The more you realize you never needed them to lift you. You just needed heaven's timing to align with your endurance. And when that happens, the world can't do anything but watch. Because they may have seen your pain, but only heaven saw your persistence. They may have mocked your silence, but only heaven heard your prayers. And when that moment comes, when heaven finally lifts you, you'll understand. The fall was training, the waiting was strategy, and the rise was always promised. It's funny how people forget the difference between noise and movement. They see someone rising, and suddenly they think it just happened. Like you blinked, and everything fell into place. They don't see the nights you broke apart in silence, the mornings you got up with nothing but the echo of your own will. They don't see the scars that still sting when you smile. But heaven does. Heaven has been keeping score of every tear that fell when nobody asked if you were okay. Every time you showed up for others, when you had no one showing up for you. Every time you swallowed your pain just to keep peace. Every time you chose forgiveness instead of vengeance. That's why this lift is different. Because it's not luck, not coincidence, not timing. It's recognition. Heaven lifts you when you've proven that you can carry light without letting darkness define you. You see, most people want the lift, but not the lessons that come before it. They crave the crown but reject the crushing. But the crushing is where the value comes from. It's what makes you real. It's what makes you strong enough not to lose yourself when the applause starts. Because applause is dangerous. It feeds the ego faster than the soul can digest it. And heaven doesn't raise egos. It raises endurance. It waits until you're humble enough to handle being seen. Until you no longer need validation to keep going. That's when the real lift begins. Not when you're desperate to prove them wrong, But when you finally stop caring who was right, and when heaven lifts you, the world gets confused because they thought they buried you. They thought their gossip, their betrayal, their rejection would break you. They laughed when you fell, whispered when you cried, and watched when you stumbled. But what they didn't realize is that while they were mocking you, heaven was molding you. The same weight that crushed you became the foundation that's now raising you. And that's what makes heaven's lift different. It doesn't come from man's approval. It comes from divine irony, the kind that turns humiliation into elevation, pain into purpose. You feel it, don't you? That shift in the air, that quiet unease hiding behind people's smiles. Something's moving, something big, and most of them don't even see it coming. The balance is changing. The comfortable are getting nervous, and the hungry are getting ready. The rich transfer has begun. Not the one they talk about in headlines, not the shiny version they sell you with suits and graphs. No, this one's raw. It's silent. It's happening in the shadows. In the minds of people who've had enough of waiting for permission. The hungry always replace the comfortable. It's a pattern as old as time. The moment someone gets too comfortable sitting on their throne, someone else starts climbing the walls to take it. Comfort breeds blindness. It makes people slow, predictable, lazy. They start mistaking privilege for power, status for security, and they stop evolving. That's when hunger enters the room. The kind of hunger that doesn't ask for opportunity. It creates one. The kind that doesn't care about who's at the top, because it's already digging beneath their foundation. Comfort is the real disease of the powerful. Once people think they've made it, they stop moving. They live on autopilot, guarding what they've built instead of expanding what they can become. But hunger, that's different. Hunger doesn't sleep. It doesn't relax. It doesn't celebrate too long. Hunger studies, waits, and strikes when no one's paying attention. And when it does, the comfortable don't even see it coming. Because they've been too busy enjoying the view from their illusion of safety. The hungry live differently. They see opportunity in chaos, value in rejection, fuel in every failure, while the comfortable are debating whether to act. The hungry already have. They move fast, take risks, make mistakes, learn, and go again. Because hunger isn't afraid to fall. It's terrified of staying the same. Comfort builds castles, hunger builds empires. And empires don't rise from stability. They rise from discomfort, from fire, from that restless desire to prove there's more to take, more to build, more to become. Every generation has this shift, the quiet rise of the ones nobody saw coming. The ones too broke to be noticed, too underestimated to be feared. But hunger changes everything. It teaches you how to think like a survivor, not a spectator. It gives you an edge that comfort can't replicate. When you've had nothing, you learn how to make something out of anything. You learn how to move when no one believes in you. And that's dangerous. Because there's nothing more powerful than someone who's had to earn every inch they stand on. Comfortable people chase maintenance. Hungry people chase momentum. One's goal is to stay secure, the other's is to stay alive. That's why the hungry never stop, because they know what it feels like to go without. They've tasted scarcity, and that taste never really leaves. It becomes a reminder, a drive, a haunting whisper that says, "Don't you dare get soft." The comfortable, though, they forget. They forget the grind, the late nights, the hunger pains. They trade discipline for indulgence, progress for pleasure, and before they know it, the very thing they once fought for slips out of their hands. You can spot the hungry in any room. Their eyes move differently. They're not distracted by comfort, by gossip, by recognition. They're studying everything, learning from everyone, calculating their next move. They don't envy the rich, they analyze them. They don't wish for success. They reverse engineer it. They don't ask for a seat at the table. They build their own. And when the comfortable finally realize what's happening, it's already too late. The transfer has already begun. Comfort makes people predictable. Predictable people are easy to replace. Hunger makes people dangerous, unpredictable, relentless. That's why the hungry rise. They have nothing to lose and everything to prove. They're not afraid of looking desperate, because they are desperate. Desperate to change, to win, to rewrite their story. And desperation, when focused, becomes unstoppable energy. You can't compete with someone who's fighting for survival when you're fighting for comfort. The truth is, the comfortable always underestimate the hungry because they measure them by status, not by spirit. They think hunger looks weak, but hunger is just discipline wearing scars. They think desperation is messy, but desperation is evolution in motion. Every great story of success begins with someone who was starving for something more. Respect, freedom, redemption. That hunger becomes their weapon, their compass, their fire. It pushes them past rejection, past exhaustion, past logic. The rich transfer isn't just about money moving. It's power changing hands. The ones who used to wait for opportunities are now creating them. The ones who were once overlooked are now leading. The ones who were quiet are now building entire movements. All because they refuse to settle. That's the difference. The comfortable talk about ideas, the hungry act on them. The comfortable dream about someday. The hungry build it today. The world doesn't care who's been at the top. It cares who's willing to climb now. And climbing takes hunger. The kind of hunger that doesn't quit after one setback. The kind that doesn't flinch at rejection or failure. Because hunger doesn't die when things go wrong. It grows stronger. It remembers why it started. It adapts, evolves, and strikes again. That's why the hungry always replace the comfortable. Because comfort dulls the senses, numbs ambition, and kills the drive to grow. Hunger sharpens, focuses, electrifies. It turns ordinary people into threats, into visionaries, into revolutionaries. Comfort builds walls to protect what it has. Hunger breaks them down to take what it deserves. The transfer has already started, and it's the hungry, not the comfortable, who are claiming what's next. Wealth follows energy, not excuses. Money doesn't chase talkers. It doesn't care about potential, promises, or plans that never leave the notebook. It moves toward action, toward momentum, toward people who make noise through results, not words. The universe has a strange rule. It rewards motion. You stay still, you lose. You move, even if you stumble, and it starts shifting things in your favor. Because wealth is alive. It flows where energy flows, and it abandons where stagnation lives. People love to complain about luck, timing, the economy, the system, all the things outside their control. But excuses are just energy leaks. Every second spent justifying failure could have been spent creating something that would have changed it. Excuses drain power. Effort creates it. The ones who move, who try, who refuse to stop. They attract the flow, because energy recognizes energy. You don't need to be perfect to win, just persistent enough to stay in motion. There's a reason why some people with less talent, fewer connections, and smaller chances end up outrunning those with all the advantages. It's energy. They move differently. They don't wait for permission. They don't overthink every detail. They start where they are, with what they have, and make it count. The rich, the truly rich, not just in money but in mind, understand this. They treat energy like currency. They protect it, invest it, multiply it. While everyone else spends their energy on fear, doubt, and gossip, they channel theirs into creation, into learning, into risk. Excuses are comfortable lies that keep you safe and small. They sound reasonable, they sound logical, they sound smart, but they steal your fire. Every "I can't" becomes a wall between you and what's already waiting for you. Wealth doesn't respect comfort. It doesn't move toward the timid. It follows conviction. It follows effort. It follows those who dare to act even when they don't feel ready. Because energy creates attraction, and excuses repel it. You can talk about goals all day, but if your energy doesn't match your words, the world doesn't listen. You say you want success, but your habits whisper otherwise. You say you want freedom, but your effort still looks like fear. Wealth doesn't move toward what you say, it moves toward what you do. The truth is, you don't manifest what you want. You manifest what you're willing to move for. And movement, no matter how small, always beats intention. People forget that money isn't paper. It's energy. It's a reflection of movement, of impact, of value exchanged. The reason some people seem to attract wealth isn't luck, it's alignment. Their energy, their focus, their action, all pointed in one direction. No leaks, no distractions, no excuses. Meanwhile, others scatter their energy everywhere, complaining, comparing, waiting, and then they wonder why nothing sticks. Because energy, like wealth, needs direction. It doesn't stay where it's wasted. You can feel when someone has that energy, that presence that says, "I'm not waiting." They walk into a room differently. They speak differently. They make people believe in them. Not because of what they say, but because of how they move. That's magnetic energy. That's the kind that money follows. It's not arrogance. It's clarity. It's that electric sense of purpose that doesn't need approval to exist. You can't fake that. You earn it through repetition, failure, and relentless consistency. Excuses are the enemy of that energy. Every excuse you make robs you of movement. It takes your drive, your curiosity, your fire, and replaces it with self-pity. And self-pity doesn't attract wealth. It attracts stagnation. Because wealth isn't drawn to need. It's drawn to creation. The ones who win are the ones who keep building, even when it looks pointless. The ones who show up again after no one claps. The ones who stop asking, "Why me?" and start saying, "Watch me." There's a quiet truth people don't like to admit. You can't fool energy. You can pretend to work, pretend to care, pretend to hustle, but the results don't lie. Energy is honest. It gives back exactly what you give it. That's why some people seem to luck their way into success. Because behind that luck was consistent energy, focused on movement instead of excuses. When you realize wealth follows energy, you stop waiting for signs. You stop overanalyzing timing. You just start, messy, uncertain, imperfect, because momentum is stronger than motivation. You might not have all the answers, but the act of moving creates them. The world doesn't open for those who wait, it opens for those who walk. Energy is contagious. When you're in motion, people feel it. Opportunities notice it. Doors that were locked start to shift. Because everything around you is responding to your frequency. Complainers attract more problems. Creators attract more possibilities. It's not magic. It's physics. Energy expands where it's focused. You want more wealth. Then pour your energy into becoming more valuable, more disciplined, more daring. The transfer doesn't happen to the loudest. It happens to the most aligned. That's why the rich keep getting richer. Not because they're lucky, but because they understand flow. They keep their energy clean. They don't spend it blaming, arguing, or doubting. They spend it learning, deciding, and executing. They know that every excuse costs them something. Every delay, every doubt, every hesitation. It's a leak in the current. And when you stop those leaks, when your energy moves like a current with direction and purpose, wealth can't help but follow. Because it always has. It always will. Chaos rewards creators, not complainers. The world has never been fair. It's never been stable, predictable, or safe. It's always been chaos wearing a different outfit. The difference between those who rise and those who vanish isn't luck. It's response. Chaos doesn't destroy everyone. It only destroys those who freeze. The rest, the ones who adapt, create, build, they thrive in it. Because chaos, as messy as it looks, is the birthplace of opportunity. When everything falls apart, everything becomes available. You see, most people panic when the system shakes. They cling to comfort, waiting for someone to fix it, someone to tell them it's okay to move again. But creators don't wait for calm. They build inside the storm. They use the noise as rhythm, the uncertainty as inspiration. While everyone else is shouting, they're constructing something new from the ruins. That's the secret. Chaos doesn't choose favorites. It rewards the ones who use it. Complainers see problems. Creators see patterns. The complainer points at what's broken and says, Look what they did. The creator looks at the same mess and says, look what I can do. It's not optimism, it's awareness. Chaos is neutral. It's neither good nor bad. It's simply raw material waiting for direction. Complainers waste that material by feeding fear. Creators shape it into something valuable. A new system, a new idea, a new way to live. When the world gets loud, complainers get louder. They gather in groups, repeating the same misery, convincing each other that there's no way out. But creators, they go quiet. They disappear into their work. They use chaos like clay, molding, adjusting, experimenting. They don't deny the madness, they dance with it. Because they know chaos is just order that hasn't been rewritten yet. And those who can handle disorder without losing their vision always come out ahead. Complaining feels good. It's instant relief, instant validation, but it changes nothing. It's a drug for the powerless. Creation, though, that's uncomfortable. It demands focus, effort, belief when everyone else has given up. That's why so few do it. But that's also why those few end up leading. The world never remembers the ones who complained about the storm. Only the ones who learned how to sail through it. Chaos is the great equalizer. It doesn't care who you are, how much money you have, what degree hangs on your wall. It levels the field. Suddenly, everyone's uncertain, everyone's guessing, everyone's exposed. That's when true creativity shines, when structure collapses. The complainer mourns what's gone, the creator builds what's next, and that's where power transfers. That's how new leaders, new thinkers, new empires are born. From those who stopped mourning normal and started defining new. There's a strange kind of beauty in chaos. It reveals who's real and who's rehearsed. Some people only know how to function when everything's easy. They need plans, comfort, stability. But chaos doesn't care about your plans. It tests your instinct, your courage, your ability to move when nothing is certain. That's where creators thrive, in the confusion that terrifies everyone else. Because creation requires tension. Without it, there's no innovation, no progress, no greatness. Complaining is rooted in control, the desire to make the world fit your preferences. But chaos doesn't bend. You either adjust to it, or you drown in it. That's why creators don't fight the storm, they use its force. They take the fear everyone's running from and turn it into fire. That's how new wealth, new art, new movements emerge, not from calm, but from collapse. You can always tell who's going to rise in chaos. They're the ones asking questions instead of assigning blame. They're curious, not cynical. While everyone else says, why now? They're asking, what can I make out of this? That single shift in thinking separates those who crumble from those who create, because creation isn't about control. It's about transformation. And the funny part, chaos never really ends. It just changes shape. Once you understand that, you stop waiting for peace to begin your work. You stop depending on perfect conditions. You start realizing the world has always been broken. And that's exactly why there's always room to build. Complainers see that as hopeless. Creators see it as permission. The richest moments in history were born out of collapse. The greatest ideas, the strongest leaders, the most powerful innovations, all from chaos. Because chaos strips away comfort, and comfort breeds mediocrity. It exposes what's fragile and rewards what's adaptable. The ones who keep their heads, who keep creating, who refuse to drown in despair, they inherit what the complainers lose. So when everything's falling apart, remember, that's the moment wealth, power, and influence begin to shift. Not when things are calm, but when they're collapsing. Because chaos doesn't punish everyone equally. It punishes those who sit still, and it rewards those who move. The complainers will always find a reason to stay stuck, to wait for rescue, to blame the system. The creators don't wait for rescue. They become it. They don't survive the storm, they master it. Because chaos was never the enemy, it was the test. And only the ones who can build inside the storm deserve what comes after it. The system fears those who no longer play by its rules. It's built to keep you predictable, to make you believe that safety is obedience, that following the rules means you'll eventually win. But here's the truth: the system doesn't reward obedience. It rewards dependency. It feeds you just enough to keep you quiet, gives you glimpses of success so you'll chase it forever, always just out of reach. The moment you stop playing their game, the moment you stop needing their validation, that's when they panic. Because a person who no longer depends on the system can't be controlled. They designed it beautifully, you know. From the moment you're born, they train you to color inside the lines. School, work, approval, repeat. You're told to be patient, to wait your turn, to do what's expected. But what happens when you stop waiting? What happens when you realize there is no line, no turn, no permission slip for freedom? That's when everything starts to shake. The system's greatest weakness is exposure. It thrives on conformity, but it collapses under self-reliance. The moment you stop needing their stage, you start building your own. And that terrifies them more than any rebellion ever could. They want dreamers, but not doers. They love ambition, as long as it stays within the boundaries they built. The system teaches you how to dream small. A safe job, a steady income, a quiet life. But the world doesn't change through quiet lives. The world changes when someone dares to walk off the map. That's why they call it reckless, arrogant, unrealistic. They use those words to keep you in check, to make you question yourself before you ever take the first step. Because if you knew how powerful you actually were, their entire foundation would crumble overnight. Once you stop playing by their rules, you start to see how fake the game was. The promises of fairness, the illusion of equal opportunity. It's all designed to keep you hoping instead of acting. You realize that the ladder they told you to climb was never meant to reach the top. It just loops, one level disguised as progress. But those who break away from it, who build their own ladders, their own systems, they don't just win. They redefine what winning means. That's what makes the system nervous. It can't predict a free mind. You can see it in their reactions. the moment someone refuses to comply. The system labels them a threat, not because they're dangerous, but because they're unpredictable. Control only works on those who seek approval. When you stop chasing validation, when you stop needing permission to exist loudly, you become something the system can't process. You're not in the formula anymore. You become chaos to them. And chaos is something they can't contain. They keep everyone busy, distracted, tired. That's how they win. They feed you entertainment, conflict, comparison. Anything to make you forget you're being programmed. And most people never wake up from it. They think they're free because they can choose the color of their cage. But those who wake up, they stop choosing cages altogether. They start building worlds, empires, movements. And the system starts whispering, that one's dangerous. Because one awakened mind can inspire 1,000 more. The system's power isn't real. It's borrowed. It only exists because people believe in it. The rules, the hierarchies, the institutions. They function on obedience, not truth. That's why the moment someone questions them with clarity, not anger, the cracks start to show. The system depends on your fear of losing what it gave you. But when you realize it never gave you anything real, just control disguised as comfort, you stop fearing loss. And a person who no longer fears loss is the most powerful kind of person there is. They want you predictable because predictability can be monetized. They can sell you dreams, time, status, even rebellion, as long as it's the kind they approve of. But when you go silent, when you stop buying, stop seeking, stop reacting, they don't know what to do. You break the rhythm of their control. You stop being a product and become a presence. That's why they fear creators, thinkers, rebels, not because they're loud, but because they don't need permission to exist. You'll notice the shift the moment you stop playing by their rules. Doors that used to open easily will slam shut. People will distance themselves. The system will test your resolve, make you doubt, isolate you. It's not because you're wrong. It's because you're free. Freedom is uncomfortable to those who've sold theirs for convenience. They'll call you crazy for wanting more, for questioning what they've accepted. But that's how you know you're doing it right. When the system starts to whisper your name like a warning. They can't control what they can't predict. And that's why the system fears you when you think differently. It's not your rebellion they're scared of. It's your independence. They can handle anger, protest, noise. They have systems for that. What they can't handle is detachment. They can't handle someone who no longer plays. Because when you stop playing their game, you force them to face the truth. That the rules were never real, and the power they claimed was only an illusion. Silence is where real power shifts happen. Everyone wants to be seen, to be heard, to prove something. They rush to announce, to argue, to defend their every move. But the ones who truly hold power, they move quietly. They don't need applause to confirm their direction. They don't explain, they don't react, they just act. Because silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. The loud ones reveal their plans, their fears, their insecurities. The silent ones let their results speak, and by the time people notice, it's already too late to stop them. There's something unsettling about silence, isn't there? People can't handle it. They fill every quiet space with noise, gossip, distraction, anything to avoid sitting with uncertainty. That's why silence scares them. It's unpredictable. It leaves them guessing. And that's where your power hides. In the confusion of others. In the space between their assumptions and your reality. While they're trying to figure you out, you're already 10 moves ahead. When you stop explaining yourself, people start to imagine. They create stories about your silence. Some flattering, some cruel, but none of it matters. Because while they talk, you're building. Every rumor, every opinion, every judgment is just noise meant to distract